the whole argument of your truth, my truth, because we both saw it from different angles, is actually a very old argument. You find this kind of argument in many Eastern philosophies, like Hinduism or Buddhism, where they always tell the story of a bunch of blind men that are brought into a room where there's an elephant. And all of the blind men touch different parts of the elephant, and then they can't agree. Yeah. So I think what that leaves out, there's a logical gap, and that is the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room. Okay, whether or not my perception of the elephant is complete.
Yes.
Welcome to Told True, where we engage with worldviews, philosophy, and faith as strategies to orient ourselves in the world. So today we're going to talk about truth itself and reality. And maybe you can explain to us why we've picked this topic for today.
Some years ago, our son, when he was still in school, I picked him up from school and he got into the car saying, "Mom, we've been given our debating topics. And one of the topics is there absolute truth?" And I was like, wow, that's a big topic. And I'm asking him about this topic. Well, what do you think? And he's like, well, he doesn't know if we can say, if it's possible to say that there is absolute truth, because, there is such a thing as when something happens, you observe it a certain way, and the way you experienced it, that's your truth. And it will be different for me. The way I observed it, the way I experienced it, will be different. And so that will be my truth. So in that case, it really won't be possible to say there is absolute truth. It's maybe part of what can be said about this topic. Certainly, there must be space to allow for different perspectives of the same circumstances or the same events. What do you think, Philip, about this thing?
When you and Peter Philip came home, he actually picked that conversation up with me as well. The part that's left out is that there was an event that was observed from different perspectives. So that means that there was some point of unity. We might have different perspectives on that event, but there was still one singular event. And in my discussion with Peter Philip, my conclusion that we sort of came to together was to say that there is no absolute truth is in and of itself an absolute statement. So you're making something absolute. The relative nature of everything is then your absolute truth. But you're still returning to the idea of an absolute truth. But this idea of just different perspectives on the world, and that's all that there is not a new idea. It's in our cultural environment, in the sort of spirit of the age, the zeitgeist. There's a lot of discussion about this. But it's actually coming, at least in the West, this idea actually comes from the 19th century. There was a philosopher, theologian, Hegel, that actually came up with this idea of thesis, meaning that's the status quo, that's the way that we think about the world right now. And then we have somebody that points out weaknesses in the status quo or in the current argument. That's the antithesis. And then finally you take those two together, you smoosh them together, and then you come into a new status quo that you would call synthesis. So this is called dialectical thinking. This was a brand new way of actually thinking, because before this, we might disagree about what the truth is, but there was an understanding that there is such a thing as truth.
Okay.
And so this has permeated all areas of thinking, not just philosophy or religion, but even science. So that some people are even questioning the very existence of reality. Am I real, or am I just a brain in a glass vat experiencing a simulation? it's
is the matrix working, and we're not experiencing
so the
actual reality.
So the Matrix is sort of actually just a movie about that question. What is real, what isn't real? But it's permeated our culture. It's a very common theme in our world. But if you have that question about reality, then that's going to bleed over into all kinds of areas of your life.
Because I think that is really where the dilemma comes in. This whole idea of now truth becoming subject to relativity or relativized. You know what about areas like law? How do we as a society determine or decide what the rules are for us to function by, to live by? Just the idea of I have freedom to live. If that is now being relativized, do you then have the freedom to live? Can I not decide, well, from my point of view, from where I am, my truth is that,
you're a horrible person, let me kill you.
You are a waste of space. And you should be removed from this planet. We'll all be better off.
Because that's your truth. That's necessarily.
My truth. From where my point of observation, you are not necessary on this planet.
Or even you're a nuisance.
So, that is dangerous thinking. It's not new thinking. The tyrants of this world for millennia past have thought that, their point of view is the standing valid point of view, and they have acted on that, and genocide after genocide through the eons of history stand to testify to the dangers of relativizing something like the value of human life or the rules for a society to provide freedom for the individuals in that society to live.
I think the dilemma of relativism is if you remove objective standards, then you are actually unraveling the very fabric that keeps society together.
Yes, correct.
But that all of that depends on a particular view of what people are.
Yes.
What's the place of people in society? So you have to ask then, what is the world in which people live, in which societies and cultures are formed? Do people have a role? Is there any value to their life? So even the moral, what we would call moral ideas, actually relate to objective reality.
Correct. So morality also would be an area where relativism has led us into a dilemma. Something like murder or genocide is an area actually of morality. What is right and what is wrong? Who decides what is right and what is wrong? Is that just from your perspective, just from my perspective? And if we have power added to us, we can do with that perspective, we can take it wherever we want to.
It's just an opportunity to express the natural consequences, the outflow of those perspectives. If we're going to challenge the idea of objective reality, we're in trouble.
I agree.
Because
I absolutely agree.
Objective reality is actually that which does not change subject to my perception or my opinion.
Or to anyone's perception.
Yeah.
That which does not change through observation. That which remains fixed, no matter what the observation or perception is from an outside source.
And I think the whole argument of your truth, my truth, because we both saw it from different angles, is actually a very old argument. You find this kind of argument in many Eastern philosophies like Hinduism or Buddhism. where they always tell the story of a bunch of blind men that are brought into a room where there's an elephant. And all of the blind men touch different parts of the elephant, and then they can't agree. The one has the tail, so he has an opinion that it's hairy and long and thin, and somebody else has one of the legs, and somebody else has stomach touching the tusks.
In other words, what is an elephant? An elephant is something hairy, long, skinny.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they would have different perspectives, and they would be describing the elephant differently. Now, it has to be a pretty big room to have the elephant and the blind men, but be that as it may, I think that so people would say you can't say there is an absolute truth.
You cannot say there is an absolute truth.
Because all that we have is different perspectives of the same thing.
Yes, you've got the trunk and I've got the tail. And I've got the stomach and you've got...
On what basis are you going to tell me that I'm wrong?
Blind man is going to be tall enough to touch the back, but for argument's sake.
Yeah. So I think what that leaves out, there's a logical gap. Mm-hmm. And that is the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room. Okay. Whether or not my perception of the elephant is complete.
Yes.
It still doesn't change the elephant in the room.
Yes.
And that's what's left out of those arguments.
Yeah.
And I think there is objective reality. Now, whether or not we have a complete picture of objective reality, that's fine. Yes. We can debate that. But to deny that there is such a thing as objective reality is a logical fallacy. Just like the idea that my truth, your truth is a logical fallacy. If I say there is no absolute truth.
That is too much of an absolute statement to be denying absolute something else.
Yeah, it's a logical fallacy. I think there's an overextension. If I say I cannot perceive all of reality, to then deny that reality exists.
Yes.
Simply because I can't perceive all of reality.
Yes.
Once again, it's an overextension.
Yes.
Just like the other one is a logical fallacy.
Yes.
Eternally
There's also
contradictory.
an overextension. In our world, in our experience in life, that we should actually say, well, there are areas of truth. And I'm not saying that these areas that I'm identifying, not necessarily an exhaustive list, but it's just something to start to say, look, things exist in different ways and things need to be understood in different ways. So the physical, natural, touchable world. I think to some extent it's probably the area that in our human history has been studied the most extensively so far. Because we study it through science, and certainly science hasn't ceased to exist. The study of natural science,
phenomena.
I mean, now, not human science. I mean, the study of natural science. The field of mathematics is still expanding and being fine-tuned. The world of physics, all of this, botany, cells, everything is still being studied. More and more and more, we're growing in our understanding.
But you touched on the area of math, and
Yeah.
mathematics actually lies in a second area. It's not actually, mathematics is not actually in the physical world. Mathematics is actually in the intellectual world.
Yes.
It's in the area of ideas.
So I think the intellectual world is then another area where we can say, okay, this is also an area where truth
it's a reality.
Where we should be studying truth and where we should be studying reality. Something that we maybe see the results of, which is our emotional world, but it is a large study or area of study. And so necessary that we study the emotional world because emotions is part of how we function. It's part of why we make certain choices and decisions. For you and me, in our worldview, we also would say that there is another area of truth or reality, and it's also not observable directly, which is the metaphysical or the supernatural or spiritual world. The spiritual reality metaphysical, supernatural truth.
But I like those words, actually, because they're indicative of something.
Mm-hmm.
To say metaphysical means above the physical.
Yeah.
It's not denying the reality of the physical.
Definitely not.
It's not denying the reality that there is some sort of order within the physical world.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily superstition. It is supernatural, meaning it is larger than the natural, observable or material universe.
Yes, yes.
But it doesn't necessarily make a split. I think sometimes in people's thinking there is this hard line between the supernatural and the natural, as if they are watertight compartments, and the supernatural is an invasion of the natural order. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy worldview. Because if there is reality, then that reality has to encompass both the visible or observable or tangible, but it has to include the intellectual. I can't touch the number 12. Okay, I can touch 12 objects.
12 pens or 12 people.
But those are objects. But the concept of grouping them together as 12, that is
the concept of 12-ness is abstract.
But I can't touch it, but I know that it exists. I'm actually interacting with it in my mind.
It does exist, and we interact with that reality on a daily basis.
And the same for emotions. It's not just a bunch of neurons firing in my mind. There is something like relationships.
Correct.
Okay. The relationship exists between you and me. It's not just existing in my mind. But there is such a thing as a relationship. There is such a thing as society, communities, families. But these are both concepts and they are realities, but they are relational realities. They are conceptual and relational, but they exist.
They exist.
Even though they're not physical and tangible.
Yeah. And I think it is also fair to say and to acknowledge that certain areas of study would actually be a combination. It would cut through these areas that we've identified, the physical and the intellectual and the emotional and, metaphysical. Something like the study of economics.
Well, not just the study of, but economics itself.
Just how economics works. There are physical commodities. Commodities, it's the basis for economics.
Yeah, there's a mineral or a rock or a tree or something.
Correct.
And somebody takes it and reshapes it. That's human activity, but they had an idea to be able to do it.
Into what actually happens in a household in terms of its economy, or in a country, or in a stock exchange in terms of its economy, comes the intellectual, the more abstract things. The intellectual world plays a role into what prices are.
But it's based on physical realities.
It's based on physical realities. The emotional world, how many stock exchanges have crashed because people got afraid? It's an emotion. It was an emotion that drove it. And, that's already 3 areas that the study of economy cuts across. But there's truth in each area that is contributing to that field of study. So, and there are laws operating, mathematical laws. It describes how things work. Now, I know that, on the cutting edge of mathematical research, they are constantly refining the formulas and the math.
Yeah, so there are more mathematical possibilities than what we have seen in physical reality. But physical reality does conform in some way to mathematical regularities. And we can understand them in that way. But I think also, for instance, to go back to your example of economy, it actually touches on the area of morality. What would be a fair distribution of wealth?
Yes.
What would be the right way to interact with the natural world or with one another?
Correct. Yeah.
How do we use the natural world? Those aren't necessarily physical realities, but they are moral questions. And it all goes back to that concept of what is reality? What is objective reality?
Yes,
It comes back to that.
Yeah.
But the more accurately we can understand an area of reality, the better we can function in that area.
Yes, definitely.
Biology. If you don't understand, you don't have to know everything.
If you don't understand germs, you can't develop
some
medicine to kill germs.
Or, at an even more fundamental level, if you don't understand the idea of sowing and reaping, like you take a seed and you put it in the ground and you get a certain result.
You get a harvest.
Yeah, or what's healthy for your body and what's not, what's harmful and not harmful, what will help a child grow and develop biologically, but you can also ask that question about emotionally.
Yeah.
What is healthy for a child emotionally? So once again, you have that overlap.
Yeah. We are saying that there are certain principles that we are observing that work regardless of perception from party A and your relative observation.
It's like Einstein and Newton, right? Newton talked about gravity as a force.
Yeah.
Okay. Einstein talks about it as, the motion of objects through time.
Okay.
Through space-time. And so you have those concepts. But whether or not you believe it's a force or whether or not you believe in Einsteinian relativity, gravity is going to have consequences for you.
Whether how we observe it from your point of view or from my point of view.
Whether I believe in it or not.
It works.
Okay, there are going to be consequences. If I step off a high building.
It's a reality, it's a truth for us on this planet.
Yeah, and I have to, whether or not I believe in gravity or not is not going to change whether or not gravity is going to have an effect. And that's what we're talking about when we say objective reality.
That is absolutely what we're talking about when we are saying we believe in objective reality and in absolute truth.
Yeah, because truth is that an accurate description of reality. So I might not understand everything about everything, but the better that I understand an area of reality, that understanding has grasped a truth about that aspect of reality.
Yes.
So there's a link between reality and truth.
Yes, there's definitely a link between reality and truth. I agree with that.
Yeah. The word reality and the word truth aren't completely interchangeable.
No, I don't think it's quite interchangeable.
So reality exists out there, whether or not it's being perceived or not.
Yes.
Or whether or not it's being...
might be in this field of emotions that, I don't know
truly
what's
have
in your
that
heart
emotion.
Now.
I truly have that emotion. That doesn't make my emotion an accurate reflection of what was done or said to me.
It's not observable. I can't perceive it.
Yeah.
I can't see your emotion.
My feeling is real, but my feeling is not necessarily fair or accurate.
Yeah.
But reality exists outside of my feelings about it, about my perception about it.
Yeah, you make a point now, which is interesting because you are speaking about, my feelings about reality, whereas we've just spoken about feelings and emotions being an area of reality that should be acknowledged. I know a famous saying that says, tweak the nose and you will make someone angry. That seems like
it's a physical action that has an emotional consequence.
It has an emotional consequence. I want to almost go as far as to say it's a law. I think probably it's not a law. You can twist somebody's nose who is unconscious, and they won't be angry at you. They won't even know. So it's not a law.
But that's like saying things will always fall when, in fact, you have things like
drag that will float.
Yeah, drag over lift. The idea is, then an aeroplane will fly.
Will fly.
Under all things being equal. In the vast majority of instances, these things will apply. And that's what we call laws or principles. It doesn't mean that one law and principle can't overcome another one temporarily, but
That's
they're
a
still
good point.
they're still functioning within the same realm.
Yes.
Okay, it's not just one law, there's a set of them.
Yes.
Or principles.
And I think just to acknowledge, to say that in our study of law and of absolute truth, that how these things interact, that is still, it is still an ongoing study.
But I think it operates on the idea that there is regularity. Well, I know many materialists, people that say that all of reality is just material, don't like the word law when we come to physical principles.
Okay.
They don't like that word.
Physical principles.
Because,
in the area of...
Because the idea of law implies a lawgiver, and we don't want to go there, and there's all kinds of philosophical discomfort.
I hear what you say. What we're trying to say is we believe in our worldview, and we're trying to make a case for it, that there is such a thing then as absolute law. Some things are in this area of being absolute, non-negotiable, never changing in the way it works and in the way it should work. So I can't choose whether gravity works for me, but I can choose whether I'm going to, take some people out of the equation on the planet. Mm-hmm. I can choose that.
But is that right or wrong? Is that allowable?
So there should be some principles, there should be some truth that applies to my decision of whether I'm going to, off some people because I don't like them.
Everybody is a materialist until you take something from them that they want. Okay, then suddenly it's unfair.
If I claim to only believe in the natural world and the material world, I'm a pure materialist. I only believe in the material world. Mm-hmm. Then that might be the case until somebody takes something from me. That's still in the material world, though.
Yeah, but why are you offended?
Okay.
Why do you have the desire for it? Why do you believe that it is wrong or unfair for somebody to take something from you? Now, I'm not saying that
you're saying there is that inherent and inborn sense of what is right and wrong when it comes to me.
And you can call it an instinct for survival, but the mere word instinct is actually referring to something that is intangible. Okay, we might observe the consequences of instinct. All right.
Don't you think the instinct is something people might argue comes from hormonal or brain activity,
or the consequences of evolution, etc., etc. But the consequence is you are removing the very basis for morality. If there is only the physical, then there is no reason to believe that something is right or wrong.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is that you might I don't think anybody is saying that if you are a pure materialist, you can't be a nice person.
No.
Right? But you have no reason to be a nice person. There is no absolute reason to describe certain behaviors as right or wrong.
Or as nice or not nice.
Yeah. On what basis do you call something desirable or undesirable?
On what basis do you then call behavior nice? Or on what basis do you then describe someone as being nice or not nice?
A good person or a nice person. Or a bad person. Or there's such a thing as evil?
Yeah.
And people will dodge and dive this question. But it's usually where many of these arguments die. Is when you say, so if somebody insists that there's only the material world, then there is no absolute right and wrong, then on what basis do you describe something like the abuse of other people as wrong?
Or somebody coming and taking everything that's mine.
Yeah.
What basis do I have then
to say it's my property?
It's wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong to take my things.
On what basis do I call it mine?
Yeah.
All right. Even the idea of just owning something, on what
Yeah.
basis do you say might doesn't make right? Then my ability to take it away from you is my right.
Yeah, my might is my right.
Then
Yeah.
it's sort of that.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
We
I
have,
think.
yeah,
And I
we
think it
have.
would be good if you could just summarize some of the ideas, maybe bring us to some sort of conclusions before we.
Sure. So, first of all, we talked about the idea that relativism leaves us with a bit of a dilemma because it fails to explain certain constants, certain things that does not change with a point of view. And in the second place, relativism can lead us into dangerous ground morally and legally, ethically. Anything goes, and it literally is the survival of the fittest. And if you're not the fittest, don't bank on survival.
And then there's no reason to complain.
Then there's also no reason for you to complain if you're not the fittest. I'm not speaking of, Einstein's theory of relativity and motion and such. I'm now speaking of it as a worldview. I see real problems with relativism. And what makes it a bigger problem is that it is being pushed in the world, in every arena, from our educational system to
Pop
media. To the courts. The second thing we've talked about was the elephant. And we've said, well,
the elephant in the room.
The elephant exists.
The elephant in the room is an elephant.
And we're using the elephant as an analogy for reality and by extension, even as an analogy for then truth. Because we started this whole conversation asking the question, is there such a thing as absolute truth? We believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. There is enough cohesion in observable reality to say that the source of that cohesion surely then must relate to absolute truth. The cohesion that we see in our observable reality cannot be the result of randomness because it's too widespread. This is something that can be studied. Its working, its effect can be observed. And we should be pursuing the study of absolute truth in as many areas as possible. So that's my summary.
I think that leads us to what we want to talk about next time, is what is that foundation of reality? Or what is the source of reality? And can we, in an intelligible way, interact with that source or origin of reality? That's where we want to go in our next conversation. Because the reason why we're having these conversations is so that we ourselves can start to orient ourselves better in the world.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can get some benefit out of that, out of those conversations. And it's important to put the alternative out there. The alternative to randomness and moral decay and absolute relativism. Yeah. It's important to put an alternative there and say, we're making the case that there is an alternative to random moral decay and relativism.
Yeah, that's
and right. So thank you for being with us for this first conversation.
For watching. Yeah. If you've enjoyed it, please like, please share. And we would actually like to hear your comments. So do leave your comments in the comments section.
Enjoy. The more that you interact with this channel, whether it is by subscribing or liking or sharing it with other people that might also be interested in these kinds of conversations, the better that it is for the channel to grow, the more people we can reach with these kinds of thoughts. And we would love to engage with you about those ideas. So please subscribe and leave us some comments. And we want to encourage you to seek the truth and speak the truth. That's why we have this channel called Tool Truth.